I still remember the day I got the offer letter. It wasn't just another job to me. It was the job. The kind of position where you feel like, finally. Maybe the years of hustling and scraping by were about to pay off. I'd been working contract. Gigs for months before that, living on instant coffee. Skipping nights out because my fun money was barely enough to cover bus fare and the occasional takeout. So when I got that call, we'd like to bring you on full-time. Didn't even care what the salary was. My brain was already picturing stability. A desk with my name on it. A fridge at home stocked with actual food instead of just bread and condiments. The first day in that office felt like walking into a different world. The smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mixed with a faint, clean scent from the janitor's morning rounds. Printers hummed in the background, a steady, mechanical rhythm. Somewhere down the hallway, I heard a booming laugh that made me pause, the kind of laugh that belongs to someone who knows they run the place. That was my boss. Or, as everyone referred to him, Mr. Carter. Nobody called him by his first name. It's not even the ones who had worked with him for a decade. He was the kind of man people described in opposites. A great leader, but intimidating as hell. When I first shook his hand, I noticed two things. His grip was firm, almost crushing. And his eyes scanned you like he was trying to decide whether you were worth the time it took to say hello. Still, there was a charm about him. He'd clap someone on the back and tell a joke that would have the whole room laughing, and then turn around and deliver a perfectly timed order that left no space for questions. I thought to myself, this is the kind of guy you want to impress. And back then, that's all I wanted to prove I belonged there. The desks were arranged in tidy rows, each with a little potted plant that I later found out the company provided. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and conversations hummed quietly under the weight of productivity. Every now and then, Mr. Carter would walk the floor, shaking hands, asking questions, giving those quick nods of approval that felt like a gold star in adult form. I didn't know it then, but the moment I walked into that office, I was stepping into a story that would change my life in ways I couldn't imagine. It's funny how some of the biggest turns in your life don't start with fireworks. They start small, quiet, so ordinary that if you weren't paying attention, you might not even notice the shift. For me, it was a Thursday afternoon. The office had that end-of-week energy. People moving slower. Conversations stretching a little longer. Emails getting answered with just one line instead of 3. I was at my desk sorting through a stack of reports when I heard a voice I didn't recognize. It was lighter than the usual office chatter. Almost out of place, I looked up and saw her standing next to one of my coworkers' desks, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand, a folded sweater in the other. She wasn't in business attire, just a soft cardigan and jeans, and that alone made her stand out in a sea of navy and charcoal gray. My coworker noticed me looking and waved me over. "This is Emily," he said casually, and then, like it was nothing, added Mr. Carter's daughter. If I had been drinking water, I would have choked. I don't know why, but in my head, the boss's daughter was supposed to be untouchable. Like some background character you hear about but never actually meet. And yet there she was, smiling. Politely at me, we shook hands. Her handshake was the opposite of her father's soft. It's almost hesitant, but her eyes held steady on mine. There was something in them. Not flirtation exactly, just interest. We talked for maybe 2 minutes. Something about the weather, about how bad the coffee was in the lobby machine. But there was an ease to it, even in that tiny conversation. Like we were both in on the same private joke, even if we didn't. Have the punchline yet? Week later, I saw her again, this time at an office mixer. She walked past me, carrying a plate of appetizers, glanced at my tie and said, "That color doesn't go with your shirt." I laughed, thinking she was serious. Then she smirked and added, "Relax. I'm kidding. Mostly." It was the mostly that stayed in my head the rest of the night, from then on. Anytime she stopped by the office or crossed my path, we'd talk. Not long conversations, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, but they had a way of stretching, of making me forget that my lunch break was technically over. And every time, I walked away feeling lighter, without really knowing why. Looking back, I think I knew before I admitted it to myself, there was something between us from the start. Just didn't realize how much it would cost me. It started with little things. A text here, a text there. At first they were just harmless check-ins. Hope your meeting went well. Or I'm at the coffee shop down the street if you're around. But those quick exchanges began stretching into full conversations by the time I realized it. We were texting every night. Sometimes until midnight, sometimes until 2 in the morning. I'd be lying. If I said I didn't think about the risk. She was my boss's daughter, not just my boss, Mr. Carter. It's the man whose approval I had been chasing since day one, and here I was. Sending his daughter memes at 1 in the morning, laughing into my pillow like a teenager, the first time we met. Outside of work, it was just coffee. I told myself that 3 times before walking into the cafe. It was a little place tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The kind of spot where the smell of espresso lingers in your clothes. She was already there, sitting by the window, sunlight. Turning her hair into gold, she smiled when she saw me. And I swear it felt like the world went quieter. 1 coffee turned into 2. 2 turned into a walk. We strolled past shop windows, talking about nothing and everything, how she used to sneak into her dad's office as a kid, how I once got locked in a supply closet for 20 minutes during my first week. Somewhere along the way, our hands brushed. I didn't move mine. Neither did she. That was the moment we crossed the line. Not officially, not in a way anyone else would notice, but in my head I knew there was no going back. In the days that followed, we found excuses to see each other: quick lunches, a walk after her yoga class. Each time, it felt like we were living in a little bubble no one else could see. The rest of the world, the office, her father, everything faded to background noise. Still late at night, lying in bed, I'd feel this tug in my chest. The rational part of me would whisper, "You know, this can't end well." But then my phone would buzz, and I'd see her name on the screen, and just like that, I'd answer without a second thought. I told myself we were careful, and maybe we were. But love, whatever you want to call that electric pull between 2 people, is a way of making you forget the rules. It's strange how the quietest moments can be the loudest in your memory. We were on her couch one rainy night. A movie playing softly in the background, something neither of us was really watching. The lights were low. The air smelled faintly of the chamomile tea she'd made. She was curled up with her legs tucked under her, staring out the window like she was trying to find the right words. And then she just started talking at first. It was little things. How her dad always double-checked her work when she helped at the office during summer breaks. How he never really approved of her boyfriends. "No one's good enough for my daughter," he'd say with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then the stories got heavier. She told me about the time he made an employee cry in a meeting. Right there in front of everyone. How he'd hold grudges for years, quietly sabotaging people's careers if they crossed him. How at home, when he was angry, the entire house felt it, even if he didn't raise his voice. I remember feeling this uneasy shift inside me, because I'd seen his temper in the office before, not the full force of it, but flashes. A slammed door here, a sarcastic jab there. I'd brushed it off as that's just how bosses are sometimes. But hearing it from her, it didn't sound like a quirk. It sounded like a pattern. One story in particular stuck with me. She told me about a family dinner where her dad had gotten into an argument with her uncle. No yelling, no swearing, just this cold, surgical way of tearing the other person down, piece by piece, until they had nothing left to say. She said it scared her more than any shouting ever could. I sat there, nodding, holding her hand. But in my head, I was replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Mr. Carter. The way he'd look at you a second too long. It's the way he'd smile without warmth when you made a mistake. It all felt different now before that night. I'd thought of him as a boss who was tough but fair, someone you just had to work hard to impress. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him, something sharp hidden under the surface, and for the first time, I wondered if I'd made a mistake getting close to her. Not because of her, never because of her, but because of the man whose approval I had once cared so much about. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a dramatic outburst or some whispered rumor in the hallway. It was subtle. The kind of change you might miss if you weren't paying attention. Except I was paying attention. Mr. Carter stopped looking me in the eye. Our usual Monday morning check-ins where he'd ask about my weekend, crack a joke about the coffee. Being strong enough to strip paint turned into quick, clipped conversations. No small talk, just business. At first I told myself he was busy. Maybe a big client was breathing down his neck, and maybe he hadn't slept well. But then I started noticing the other things. He'd walk into a room, greet everyone, and skip over me. In meetings, if I offered an idea, he wouldn't respond directly. He'd just move on to someone else. It wasn't overtly hostile. It was worse. It was intentional. One afternoon, I caught him watching me from his office doorway. Not the kind of watch where someone's lost in thought. The kind where you're being measured, weighed, and maybe already found lacking. The second our eyes met, he turned and walked away. It wasn't just me who noticed. A coworker I was friendly with pulled me aside in the break room. "You and Carter. Okay?" she asked, keeping her voice low. I laughed it off. "Yeah." "He's just stressed," but the look on her face told me she didn't believe me. By the end of that week, I could feel it in my gut. That quiet, gnawing sense that something was coming, the way animals know a storm is about to hit before the sky even changes. I didn't have proof, but I knew, he knew, and I couldn't shake the question that kept replaying in my head. What exactly did she tell him? It happened on a Wednesday, mid-morning. I was at my desk, halfway through an email, when his assistant appeared beside me. "Mr. Carter wants to see you." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. The walk to his office felt longer than usual. The air seemed heavier. The steady hum of the printers, the chatter of phones, all of it blurred into background noise. When I stepped inside, he didn't tell me to sit. He just stood behind his desk, hands resting on the edge like he was holding himself back. "Close." "The door," he said. I did. The sound of it clicking shut behind me was louder than it should have been. He started with small questions. But there was nothing casual about them. "How long have you been working here? How do you like it?" His voice was tight, every syllable sharp enough to cut. Then he went quiet, just stared at me for a beat too long, and finally, he said it. "I hear you've been spending time with my daughter." No accusation. Shh. No raised voice. Just a simple sentence. That landed like a punch to the gut. I felt my chest tighten, cold spreading through me like ice water. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My brain was scrambling for the right response. Deny it? Admit it? Pretend I didn't understand the question? "You think I don't know what goes on under my nose?" Continued. His voice was calm now, almost quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that makes you lean in because you're afraid of missing something. "I don't like surprises, especially not when it comes to my family." My palms were sweating. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew where this was headed. I tried to explain, to say it wasn't what he thought, that we'd kept things respectful, that I respected him, but he just held up his hand to stop me. "That's enough," he said, and the way he said it. It didn't sound like a pause in the conversation. It sounded like a verdict. I wish I could say there was a long debate, that I fought my case, that I had some big, righteous speech ready, but it wasn't like that. It was quick. Almost surgical after that pause in his office. Mr. Carter looked me dead in the eye and said, "I think it's best if we part ways," effective immediately. There it was. No yelling, no drawn-out lecture. Just the words "you're fired," delivered so matter-of-factly that for a second I wondered if I'd imagined them. I managed to nod, trying to keep my face neutral inside. My stomach was twisting in knots, every muscle in my body tight. Enough to snap. He didn't ask if I understood. He didn't need to. I walked out of his office, every step feeling like it weighed 10 pounds at my desk. I grabbed the empty cardboard box they kept in the supply closet for storage. Funny thing, I'd only ever seen people use those boxes for one thing: leaving. I started packing slowly, my coffee mug, the little plant I'd been keeping alive since my first week, few personal files. I told myself to move like I had all the time in the world, as if the slower I went, the less real it would feel. Could feel eyes on me. Some coworkers pretended to keep working, stealing glances when they thought I wasn't looking. A couple gave me sympathetic half smiles. One person just stared, curiosity plain on their face. I didn't give them anything to talk about. No angry outburst, no dramatic scene, just quiet, methodical packing, like I was dismantling the version of myself that had walked into this place months ago, hopeful and ready to prove something. When I finally stepped into the elevator, the doors closed with a dull thunk. The ride down was silent except for the soft hum of the machinery. When I walked out into the street, the cold air hit me like a slap, sharp, waking me up. It was over, just like that. I didn't text her right away. I sat in my car for almost an hour after walking out of that building, staring at the steering wheel, trying to figure out how to even start that conversation. What do you say? Hey, your dad just destroyed my career. How's your day going? Eventually, I just drove to her place. When she opened the door, I didn't even have to speak. She took one look at my face and knew. He fired you, she said, not a question. I nodded. The anger came fast. Her jaw tightened. Her voice got sharper with every word. He had no right. This isn't even about work. It's about control. He's been doing this my whole life, deciding who I can see, who's good enough. I let her talk, partly because she needed to, and partly because I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, I'd say something I couldn't take back. Then she started telling me things I hadn't heard before, stories she'd kept to herself. Maybe because she didn't want me to see her father differently, or maybe because she hadn't wanted to see him differently. Either she told me about a time in college when she was dating someone he didn't like, how her father had accidentally run into the guy, pulled him aside and made it very clear that the relationship was over. How, within a week, the guy stopped answering her calls. She'd never gotten a real explanation. But now she was sure. She told me about arguments with her mom that always ended the same way, with her father's calm, deliberate dismantling of her point of view until she doubted herself entirely as she spoke. I felt this strange mix of heartbreak and solidarity, like we were both casualties of the same quiet war, and, weirdly, there was a sliver of relief too. No more pretending. No more hiding in plain sight. I was wondering if or when he'd find out it was out. Ugly, messy, final. We sat on a park bench as the sun went down, holding hands like we were trying to anchor each other. Neither of us said it out loud. But I think we both knew this wasn't going to be an easy road. Her against her father. Me without a job. But for that moment at least, we're on the same side. The first few days after it happened, I didn't do much of anything. I stayed home, scrolled through job listings without really reading them, reheated coffee until it tasted like burnt paper. But the conversations with her kept replaying in my head. The things she'd told me about her father. They weren't just ugly family stories. Some of them were the kind of things that could ruin a reputation, especially for a man who built his image on being fair and respected. I'd sit at my kitchen table at night, the only light coming from my desk lamp, laptop open in front of me. One tab held my resume. Another tab held an email draft. In the draft were bullet points, incidents, names, dates, everything she'd shared with me that could be verified if someone bothered to look. And I kept asking myself, do I send this? Part of me wanted badly to take all the power he had and rip it out from under him, to make him feel even a fraction of the humiliation I'd felt sitting in his office, hearing those words. But another part of me, the quieter part, wondered if I'd just be chaining myself to him forever. Because revenge isn't clean. It doesn't end with a satisfying bow. It keeps you tethered to the very thing you want to escape. I stared at that email draft for hours one night, my finger hovering over the send button. And in that moment I realized something. He'd already taken my job. But he didn't have to take my peace, so I closed the laptop. Not because he deserved my silence. Didn't. But because I deserved to walk away without looking back. It wasn't the easy choice. It didn't feel heroic. It just felt quiet, and for now, quiet was enough. It's strange how quickly life fills the spaces you thought would stay empty forever. I found another job, smaller company, it's less prestige, but a place where my boss actually knows my first name, and says it without a scowl. I still see her sometimes, though not as much as I used to. We didn't break because of each other, but because we needed to see what life looked like without all that weight hanging over us. I walk into work now without that pit in my stomach. I drink my coffee without wondering who's watching me. And every now and then, when I think about him, the way he leaned back in his chair, certain he was untouchable, I can't help but smile. Not because I forgive him, but because I know power like his comes with its own expiration date. The truth, she told me, is still in my head, but it no longer burns. It's just there, a reminder that people's facades are costumes, and the seams always show if you look closely enough. I'm not as naive as I was when I first walked into that office. I know now that not every handshake is genuine, not every smile is safe, but I also know I can survive losing something I thought I needed and come out standing taller. The world didn't end. The skyline is still wide open, and there's something freeing in knowing I don't need him, his job, or his approval to move forward.